So we're going to get going right now. My name is Brian Walsh. I'm going to act as moderator for this panel. Most of you students that are on board here, I hope know me or have heard of me, or you've had me in class. If you haven't yet, then you will at some point in time, because if you are a supply chain major anyway, because there's some classes I'm the only one that teaches. So if you want to graduate, you're going to have to come through me. Let's see, we've got a couple of housekeeping notes. First off, just know that this session is being recorded. Secondly, if you have questions that you would want to ask any of the panelists or myself, just please type them into the chat room and we will periodically take a look in there and see what's going on. These are our intended panelists. Steve Silverman is with us right now. We are waiting for Greg and Alicia to jump on, but
I'm here.
Okay, Alicia's with us. So now we're just waiting for Greg. I'm sure it's just a technical, glitch here. Last two things. In the chat, Christine is going to post the survey to the URI Educational Climate Survey. If you can take that, if you haven't already, that would be great. And secondly, there is another session after this. So feel free, if you haven't already, to sign up for a second session. So this session deals specifically with supply chain. So first thing I want to do is introduce our guest speakers and have each of them take 5-8 minutes, just talk about what their background is, how they got started in the industry, educational background, what they're currently involved in right now, things along those lines, knowing that we're kind of trying to steer it to a supply chain slant. And again, students, questions that you come up, just get them in that chat room and we will get to them, because we're going to leave at least 15-20 minutes at the end for Q&A, because that's really why we're doing this, is to allow you to have opportunities to ask these industry experts questions. So Steve, you've been on the call now for a little while, so why don't you go ahead, introduce yourself and give us a little bit about your background.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Steve Silverman. I am Senior Vice President of Marine at Berkshire Hathaway Specialty Insurance, which I'm based in Boston. I am 1980, so you can tell how old I am, graduate of the Insurance and Finance School at University of Rhode Island. And I've been involved in insurance since I graduated, in various responsibilities, including, on and off over my career, being involved in some element of ensuring the supply chain, typically through most of my career domestically, ensuring, goods in transit, goods in storage and what have you. And the last few years I've become more involved in international transit. And I've noticed really a kind of a burgeoning industry, certainly in the supply chain in general, just because of the development of, just-in-time deliveries and just sophistication of the industry. And as a result of that, there's been an increase in the sophistication in insurance applications, risk management applications, both within the operations of supply chain at various levels, be it trucking industry, freight forwarders, shippers. There's pharmaceutical companies that you see recently from the vaccine manufacturers and the rollout, insurance brokers, consultants. So when I saw the topic of careers and in supply chain, I wanted you to kind of think about not only the applications that you're talking about in your classes for inventory management and warehouse management, but the idea of risk management and insurance and financing, the risk taking that every operation in the world is going to do. You can't insure everything. You can't transfer risk to insurance companies. Sometimes you have to finance it internally. Sometimes you have to figure out ways to mitigate it. So there's loss control, there's loss prevention, there's just using your smarts in terms of trying to reallocate where the distribution of your goods are being sourced from, where they're being shipped from. Because, you know, if you're at a manufacturing firm, you don't want a reduction in your inventory or your raw materials to be able to stop operations. So, you know, there's a risk management operation in a lot of large firms. There's risk management operations that help consult with these firms. And I wanted you to be aware of that opportunity. There's a lot of logistics practices, as we call them, in insurance firms, particularly in the brokerage operations. And a lot of the expertise that you're developing in these classes will transfer well into either the expertise of risk management and insurance within the companies that you would work for, or in brokerage world or the insurance world. And I think it would be something for you to be mindful of as you're looking for opportunities as you get ready to graduate. And kind of keep that in mind when you're looking at disasters throughout the world. Supply chain was a huge issue when you had the tsunamis in Thailand, when you had the tsunami in Japan, where the whole auto industry almost kind of crashed to a stop because the paints and spare parts and things like that were stopped from production. We talked a little bit earlier with Brian about the shipments in the Suez that are being stopped. So there's a lot of interesting things going on, and you know, when you start thinking about what can stop the supply chain from working, it's not only man-made things. It's acts of God. It's kind of stupidity on the part of people and things like that. So it's a fascinating area where you're trying to find out what can gum up the works, if you will, in production, and how you can think about alternatives to reduce the risk of loss. And then in the event that it can't be reduced or mitigated, how you would either self-finance it, insure it, and the possibilities are endless. And I think the pandemic has showed people that there's always things changing in the world that you have to think about. So it can be fascinating. And I wanted to make you aware of a possibility for another alternative in your career, or at least another opportunity to, within your career, to kind of think about that career path.
Awesome. Thanks for that. I jotted down a few notes that I might come back and ask you a few questions about, when we do like round two. But Alicia, glad you could join us. It's always a pleasure. I see you as much now almost as when I had you in class, but if you would like to unmute and, share with your background and experiences with the students.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep. Nope, you're back. Nope, can't hear you now.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you.
Okay, sorry. My computer's been really slow since I started it this morning, and I've been having issues all day. So thanks everyone for joining. Really appreciate it. I love coming to these events, as Brian knows. I'm sure some of you recognize me from other things that I've been involved in with URI. So my background is definitely a lot different than Steve's. So basically, I graduated from URI 4 years ago. I graduated from the supply chain program at URI. And within the past 4 years, basically my career path went from having 2 internships during undergrad. So I had a summer internship at Amgen, and then I had a supply chain consulting internship for my last year of school. And then after that, I moved to Boston. So I was from Rhode Island, moved to Boston. And then I had a contract role at Moderna. So I was really interested in life sciences from working at Amgen. And it was a great opportunity to get my foot in the door in the life sciences space. So I worked with Moderna for about 6 months just for my contract. And then what they were doing is they were actually setting up a new manufacturing facility and doing an SAP implementation. So SAP is a really big industry software. So it was a huge effort. So they hired a lot of people to help with that. And then also opening a new manufacturing facility is a huge effort too. So I was supporting the purchasing of supplies and then also helping with the SAP implementation as well. So then after my contract ended, I ended up working for a tech firm. So I was working for a company called Isotope. I was a supply chain specialist there. And basically it was more of a startup product. So what I did was I helped them establish their supply chain. So it was from everything from purchasing packaging and helping with product design and sourcing materials to actually setting up their 3PL. So I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed how I got a lot of projects there, and that kind of led me to where I am now. So right now I work for Accenture. So it's a top 5 consulting firm, huge consulting firm. We have 500,000 people worldwide. So it's a lot different than the startup company I was a part of before joining the firm. So right now I am part of a supply chain group, specifically life sciences supply chain. And it's also fulfillment too. So I'm mostly working on distribution, logistics, and warehousing projects. That's not everything I've done in the past 2 years, but that's basically our focus. So our group, basically what we do is we solve supply chain issues. So Steve was talking about his supply chain issues that he has with risk management. So we help companies with different supply chain issues, a lot of operational inefficiencies. So we do business process transformation, like I mentioned, specifically for fulfillment. So it's a lot of distribution logistics. And then also we do implementation of softwares too. Accenture's core competency is a lot of software implementation. So it's not everything we do, but it's a lot that we do. And right now, the project I'm working on, I'm working with a top 5 pharma company who's doing a divestiture. So what they're doing is they're a very large company, 40-something billion dollars, and they're splitting off a part of their business. So right now I'm working with the distribution logistics team in North America, helping them actually with the separation and then the startup of the new supply chain. So startup of their 3PL, startup of their distribution operations, and warehousing as well. So that's kind of my background. So let us know if you have any questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Alicia. So I'm going to give is Greg Welch, have you been able to join us? Looks not. So, okay, that's fine.
Did you want to poll so you can see who's here?
No, I can. I mean, I've got the participants opened on the side, so I can see who's here. I was just.
No. I meant, do you want to poll so you can see what the kids are?
Oh, sure. Why don't you,
why
don't you throw the poll out? So you should have 2, grade and major, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so let's, if you guys could just answer this so we could give our panelists,
Oh, also, so something I forgot to add, I'm also in the URI Masters in Supply Chain program right now too. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to me about that too, or ask them in the chat.
You getting a commission on that?
I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not, but I love URI. So you guys all chose the right school.
Excellent. So here's our results of the first poll.
All right, so it looks to be evenly split between sophomores and juniors, followed by seniors, and then, freshmen afterwards. So that doesn't totally surprise me that, there's a lot of sophomores and juniors here. Juniors are probably committed to the program. Sophomores either recently have or are, strongly thinking about it. And, this is a great opportunity to get some insight from some industry folks on, exactly, what is some of the career paths that might be available out there. So while we park Greg off to the side, Steve, let me come back to you. And have you noticed anything within your industry that has significantly changed as the result of COVID? Whether how you're thinking about, insuring clients or doing risk advisement with clients, and how much of that do you think is short-term versus long-term? And I'm going to ask like a couple of questions. Well, actually, you know what? Answer that. And then I won't be like the reporters in the warehouse that rattle off 15 questions at the first time, and nobody remembers what they are.
So the issue with COVID and insurance is that the industry generally had not contemplated providing coverage for the loss of revenue that was generated because of delays resulting from COVID. And was a fairly standard industry clause going back, and you see a lot of litigation on it, whether it's part of the supply chain or whether it's with restaurants, bars, taverns, and things like that. In the marine world, there's possibilities of some coverage in the event that delays in the shipments that could have created damage to perishable goods could have been covered. So that's something that, we certainly would consider, pre and post the COVID issue. But it's a relatively small universe of potential damage compared to the actual economic losses that people have sustained because of COVID. But I think going forward, there's going to be a demand, and there's going to be an interest in the kind of general public and the supply chain in general to kind of have solutions for, issues like this going forward. And I'm not sure how the insurance industry or government is going to be able to act to be able to address this, because as you can tell, the magnitude of the loss is staggering because of the worldwide nature of this pandemic. So
do you have many like interruption of business clause or addendum options like in your insurance now?
So it depends on the kind of policy. So in the supply chain, there's hundreds of different options for coverage depending on what you want to look for. My specialty happens to be covering the cargo and the goods that are being shipped, whether it's domestically or internationally. And in those cases, all we're covering is the goods that are being shipped and perhaps the selling price on those goods. So if the goods cost X and they've been sold for, X times, whatever, we would pay for the selling cost, and then we'd be done with it. So the future earnings of the organization, because of a loss of production capabilities, what have you, from COVID, would not be something that necessarily I would be responsible for. But if the goods were damaged and you lost the selling price for them, you'd be paid the selling price on a loss.
Okay, so let me. I'm going to go back to the Suez Canal issue for a second. So.
Sure.
Loss related to delay in arrival would not be covered loss as a result of, hey, they're trying to refloat this thing and it accidentally tips over, and
Okay, well, so you've got a couple of, so we remember that you could have various types of insurance now to think about. So you could have the coverage on the goods on the containers. You could have coverage on the vessel itself. You could have coverage for the liability of the vessel owner because of damage to the goods and the canal. But if we're talking about the goods only, a delay in itself would not be covered unless there was some damage to the goods as a result of the delay, and that would typically be perishable goods.
Okay, so it sounds like there's many little caveats that can get
exactly.
written into this for a variety of different reasons.
Yep. And when I first started learning insurance at URI, they were telling us the first insurance product ever sold was an ocean marine policy, going back, to just after AD, when people were starting to ship goods all over the world, and they wanted protection on it. So guys in a bar would say, "All right, I'll guarantee your shipment gets there." So it is historical, and it goes back for years. But there are very, the policy's been in effect for years, and they've expanded in terms and conditions. And depending on your size and your sophistication, you can get, broader coverage than if you or I went to Aiden on the street and tried to get the same thing.
All right, let me ask you one more question about, because I find this Suez Canal blockage kind of like, fascinating to some degree, right? So you got, upwards of 100 ships now queued in each direction.
Right.
And, I was watching, Squawk Box this morning.
Yeah, I saw it too.
All right, so I think this is where I saw it. But anyway, some firms are now trying to evaluate, look, do I want to get myself stuck in that queue, or am I just going to start taking the longer route, across or
Africa.
Like around Africa, okay?
Right.
Which I think they said was going to add about $500,000 to expenses to make that longer journey. And then they made another point that I think was the increased risk of piracy.
Exactly.
Given,
Along Africa.
that area of the world.
Right.
So is your organization potentially engaged in discussions right now with shipping firms that said, hey, I think I am now going to go around Africa instead of like waiting in this bottleneck, and may that higher risk affect your rates?
Yeah, potentially it could, especially if you're going around the parts of Africa that are potentially higher piracy. Generally, piracy would be, something that would be contemplated. It's where you have a little bit of a gray area, and some companies have sold different types of coverages when the cargo is held for ransom and you have to pay ransom to pay it back. But most ocean cargo policies do have coverages for war and strikes and riots and civil commotion and things along those lines. But the coverages are written pretty broadly. So if you have to have a change in or deviation in your route because of an event like this, the coverage would apply.
Okay.
Now that does not necessarily mean that the ship owner who has to pay the extra $500,000 in fuel costs or something like that would necessarily be paid for that. I'm talking about just from the coverage from the standpoint of the cargo that's on the vessel.
Okay. So for all you students out there, a totally different perspective, like on supply chain. When you woke up 2 days ago, like, did you even think that you would be thinking about Suez Canal and blockage and new trade routes and piracy and all this other stuff?
Exactly.
You students should always be paying attention to the news. The first thing I said in my classes yesterday was price of oil the day before shot up 3%. Why? And I didn't get as many, answers as I was hoping to get, right? So you guys need to get just plugged in. If I'm not mistaken, every student at URI has access to a free subscription to the New York Times, if I am not mistaken. I mean, just load that on your phone and they will send you every morning. You can sign up for this like 2-page update, what's going on in the world. And it is an awesome way to just within 5 minutes understand what's going on. So, all right, so you know what? I see that Greg Welch has now joined us, so we're going to backtrack a little bit. Greg, thanks so much for sharing your time. Why don't you jump on and tell the students about yourself, your background, your work experience. I think you kind of know where we want to go with this.
Yeah, no worries. Apologies everyone here for my delay. I'm in 2 panels, so I guess my schedule's mixed up, but good morning to you all. Great to see you. I'm Greg Welsh, class of 2009, and I graduated with, I believe, one of our first classes of supply chain management as a major in the College of Business. So really throughout my undergrad tenure there, we were still sort of shaping this program. It was certainly much smaller than it was today. At the time, I think we graduated with 6 people. So it was a much different time of helping develop the curriculum and where and what was important at the time. And how things have changed is tremendous. And it's very happy for me to see where we are today. So my background, as an undergrad in supply chain management, as Professor Walsh was saying, I envisioned most of this being physical supply chain type shipping, a lot of balance of trade of, how things move across the globe, and whether or not you work in a distribution center or you work in a port or something like that. It felt like that was what supply chain sort of meant based on what I was learning in my classes. And I imagine with what you just heard, and I missed Stephen's great spiel here, but I imagine what you've heard is something, a different side of the coin. And that's kind of where I landed as well, is that supply chain is such far-reaching compared to what you initially might be learning. And it's great to know that there are a lot of other areas that you can get exposed to. But I jumped into an internship initially as a graduating senior at this point, it would have been fall 2008. And if anyone knows what was going on in fall 2008, it was not a great time to be getting a job. And I was getting an internship at a bank, which was even worse at the time. So I was lucky enough to manage that job, because it's kind of a funny thing when the economy goes down. areas like procurement and supply chain are in high demand. That's the area where the people are trying to save money, lower their risk, really rebound and make sure that they're not going to be susceptible to the economic environment. So I landed a job in procurement. Really at the time, I wasn't quite sure procurement was even part of supply chain, but it very much is. And we did a lot of areas at the time when I joined. It was mostly ex-consultants. So I learned very quickly a lot of different areas and how to manage them, and everything from, how they buy office supplies to how they buy, laptops, to how, the couriers that go along in the armored cars, to processing networks that run on your credit cards, like all the things that make a bank infrastructure work, require us to go out and find top tier companies to work with and negotiate their contracts and really make sure that we're sustainable as an organization. So a much more indirect way of what we think of as supply chain. And it's something that certainly developed as a quick passion for me. I think I saw the writing on the wall that traditionally most corporations have had this kind of concept of quote unquote purchasing, where you have people there essentially issuing purchase orders to suppliers, and suppliers will then do the work that they're supposed to do or send you goods, and then they'll invoice for it so they can get paid. That kind of transactional process, that basic thing, has been happening for a very long time. But how you make that strategically important and viable for a company to essentially make that into a very viable part of their business is kind of like the next level of how companies end up leapfrogging others and really standing above the rest and managing their costs overall. So this concept of strategic sourcing and how they manage their overall costs in their supply chain really wasn't something that's been done way back when. So there's kind of a skill gap and an age gap, and that's something that frankly I plan to take advantage of. And I think that's still happening, where there's going to be people retiring and people of our skill set coming into the workforce, where there's tremendous opportunity in the areas of supply chain, procurement, and kind of the offshoots from there, so that companies can manage their costs effectively in a global market. It's becoming more and more important. I'm seeing it now in my current career, which I'll get to in a second, where with the economic times the way they are, things are definitely more important now in how we manage costs and everything we have. So anyways, let me back up here so I don't start rambling. But so I went from Citizens Bank here in the Northeast. I started mainly doing all sorts of things that I can get my hands on as an intern. I was fortunate enough to get hired at a full-time role. And I stayed there for about 2.5 years or so. And, I saw my career sort of plateauing there, and made the conscious decision that I needed to get kind of some more experience and maybe some different experience. The good thing that comes with that is typically when you jump companies, you're making a little bit more money typically. So I was able to get a job in Boston with John Hancock doing similar type work, but with more of a global scope. They're owned by Manulife Financial, which is based in Toronto. So still within the financial sector, but still doing the same type of work. I grew my roles there, got promoted a couple times, and stayed there for, I think, 3 years and change. I went to law school at night, which I don't know if any of you are interested in law school, but it is not a simple task. And I in hindsight, probably should have gone a different route, but I'm happy to talk to you about higher education separately on this call. But after my first year of law school there, I had no intentions of leaving. I got recruited by IBM to do more of the consulting side of the business, and their business is what they call business process outsourcing. And what that means is companies will take what their operation is today, in this case, procurement and parts of finance, and they'll outsource it to a third party, typically a consulting firm like an Accenture, like IBM, and a whole slew of others. And we will do that work for them. We will kind of adjust their process, transform their process, make it more efficient. We will do the work ourselves. And typically it's a managed service so that we have essentially targets to hit, whether that's cost savings, whether that's efficiency in processing. There's a whole bunch of things that go with that, but they basically don't have to worry about it anymore. It's not their core competency. If they are a manufacturer, focus on manufacturing, and we'll manage the back office. So I got this job here at IBM, and since then, I realized that this allowed me to get many different types of experience with different organizations. So since joining in 2016, I've had, 2014, I think I'm on 7 years now. Geez. It's allowed me to get, I think, 7 or 8 different clients. So I've been now involved just on the IBM experience here. I've gotten to work with, I believe, 7 clients, all different roles, different scopes, different problems, different issues, different parts of the globe that they're in. So it's a very exciting time, and it really helped me broaden my experience. And I feel like I have a much better handle on what's going on at any given time because of that. So, I encourage you, and I'll pause after this, but I'll encourage you that whatever, avenue you choose to go down, try to choose the ones that allow you some of those most options and the most well-rounded types of experience, because ultimately the best way you learn is by, tapping into those experiences that you've personally had and forming your own opinion, right? You can always get trained on a specific job, but you really become a value add contributor and someone that really is a value to the organization when you can tap into your experience and really show that you can have a perspective on what's going on. So right now, my role here is a global sourcing manager at IBM. I'm on the very short list to be what they call a delivery project executive. This would be owning our overall procurement contracts with a third-party client. Typically with IBM, their client base are like the blue chips, like the Coca-Cola, the Pepsis, the AT&Ts, very big companies like that. And my role would be to own that procurement function with them, everything from procurement operations to processing the purchase orders on a very, very back office level to the upfront big time strategic deals that they're doing with their largest suppliers. So whether they're, dealing with companies like Dell or HP or Cisco that provide their infrastructure on an IT basis, or, they're negotiating big real estate deals, things like that. Our team would still be part of that. And we have to make sure we're doing that to the best of our ability. And I'll own everything from all the people on that account, sometimes anything from, a handful to a handful onshore here in the US to 100 or 200, 300 offshore, using multiple, what we call delivery centers or operation centers, like India, China, Malaysia, sort of all over the globe. But yeah, it's an exciting time, exciting role. I love what I do. That's why I've been in procurement now for, let's say, almost 12 years. And it is very much an integral part of supply chain, as much as I didn't think that it was initially. And I'm only here because of what I've done in my undergrad time at URI, and I've been intimately involved as much as I can be since then with our alumni board and helping undergrads get started in their career. And if there's anything I can do to personally help, please don't be shy to reach out.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg. Christine, you want to launch that second poll?
Sure. Now, the second poll they loaded is, do you have an internship this summer?
Okay. Is there a third question, or were these the two?
These were the two they loaded.
Okay, that's fine. All right, so it looks like we are 28% yes, 31 no, 41 working on it. So you've got close to 70% that are yes or working on it. I would, for whatever my 2 cents are worth, you need at least one internship. If you can get 2, awesome. You need to have at least 1. And employers are looking for students that are well-rounded. I mean, it's not just the 4.0 GPA, okay? Fine, I'm not knocking the GPA, but if you're a 4.0 GPA and you stay buried in your dorm room for 4 years, you are not going to be as attractive to a prospective employer as somebody with a 3.5 GPA, but is actively involved in clubs or does volunteer work and has had internships and all of those other things that, I think makes up a well-rounded student. So I'm happy to go down that path with you guys individually at another point in time. So let me say this, we've got if you've got questions, start getting them in this chat room right now, because I'm going to ask a couple of high-level questions, open it up for the 3 board members here or panel members to respond to. But then I want to leave, at least 15, 20 minutes to take questions from you guys. So start pumping them into the chat room. You've heard each of these 3 individuals speak now to get a little bit of their background. So here's my question to the panelists. If you want to each take like a minute and respond to that. Traditionally, I think many companies have, built their supply chains to do one of a few different things. Either I'm going to be the fastest, and that's the performance dimension you key in on, or I'm going to have the highest quality, or I'm going to have the lowest cost. And that 4th dimension we often talk about is flexibility, but I think it's, of the 4, it's probably the one that most companies don't necessarily think about. That would be ranked number 4 for most, not all, but for most companies. I guess my question is, given some of the things that we've witnessed and experienced, obviously COVID, but even, Steve mentioned, the tsunami in Japan, which was just about 10 years ago, and the impact that had to the automobile industry. And the Japanese, which kind of led a lot of the just-in-time philosophies, and kind of ooh, we just got burned really bad. Is that really the best way? Do you see companies that your company or companies you engage with shifting to make their supply chains more flexible, potentially giving back a little bit of cost and time in order to increase that flexibility? So Steve, you want to answer that first?
Well, obviously I'm not on the production side, but I think we're seeing our clients trying to have a varied distribution. I think the automobile industry is a very good example where it was, it's become very concentrated, whether it's the electronics, Brian, I think your point that you made about reading the paper every day and it has applications in the supply chain, it has applications in the insurance industry, no matter what you have, but you're looking at even the supply of semiconductor chips for automobiles, and it's so concentrated in a certain area. And so you really need to kind of think about it. While it's a worldwide distribution and supply chain, both in terms of production and sales, you don't want to have all your eggs in one basket. And I think that's what we're learning as a society now is, I think, we're talking about omni chains for distribution and for sales. We really need to think about that for production now. And I think that's going to be the next wave. Just in time is great, but you need to have some backup plans. And I think that, the kind of the crowding of the Suez Canal and the backup of the ports on Long Beach, and that's it doesn't sound like risk management. It sounds like management of supply chain. But when you have to think about what your risk is, and in a manufacturing function is having the raw materials to make your product. That's a risk. It's not necessarily an insurable risk, but it's a risk to your operation. And you have to think about that in the supply chain overall. So I think we're going to have to see trends where you're going to have, European manufacturing and distribution locations and Asian and, maybe South American and things. And it's just going to be mitigating. The world is getting bigger, but it's getting smaller because of the disasters and whether it's man-made or natural, or just people messing up. So
I like your omni-channel analogy. I like that analogy. And, we were talking about this maybe a month and a half ago. One of the first things I said in class one day, I said was, okay, why did Ford announce a potential $2 billion shortfall in sales? And I was going with the semi-chip gig, right? But again, read, pick whether it's CNN or Fox. I could care which, are
Right.
you on the left or the right, but just like get the news. All right.
I like the Wall Street Journal, and actually, I think 2 days a week they have a supply chain section, and I get an email every day or a couple of days a week about the supply chain, and it just focuses on supply chain and what's going on in the industry. So, again, I'm not as involved in it day to day as you are, but I'm looking at it from strictly an insurance perspective. But that's how important that, what you guys are studying is every day. That's a section of the Wall Street Journal. I think that's a high honor. You guys you're in the forefront of commerce.
Yeah. All right, Alicia, you got a quick comment on supply chains becoming more flexible?
Yeah, so I think flexibility is very important, but if you take from more of a transportation distribution lens, which is kind of more of my area, it's a lot more visibility and being more proactive to manage risks. So a lot of our clients are doing, I'd say they're sacrificing costs, and they're doing a lot more transformations around increasing visibility and maybe doing a control tower, and things like that, to be able to look at their supply chain as a whole and proactively manage risk before they happen. So instead of being flexible, if things happen, it's more trying to see if things can happen before it does, so that their supply chain managers can manage their supply chain.
Okay. You guys, any of the companies you're looking with thinking about autonomous tractor trailer trucks?
Yep. And actually, one of my colleagues wrote an article about it recently. I could drop it in the chat if anyone's interested in learning more about it.
Okay. I'm just curious. We had somebody present in one of my classes last week about that, which he's been doing for, a few semesters now. I think it's kind of interesting. It's got some cool capability. It's also got some limitations, but all right. Greg, any comments you want to add about flexibility in supply chains?
Yeah, certainly echo, both of the comments that have already been said here. Visibility, I agree, Alicia, is that's number one priority right now. And, to take it a step deeper is just getting the data on your supply chain is probably the hardest task that a lot of companies are facing. My current client is a semiconductor manufacturer, and it's been interesting times right now. So you can't predict natural disasters, right? Let's put that in its own bucket. But, for everything else, things that we could be predicting and could be managing better, do you have the data around it to support it and manage it? And then, like Alicia said, if you can get proactive and do something at least partially before it gets you in the at-risk bucket, then you're much further along than others. It gives you that competitive advantage. And really, that's all it's about. If you think about, you don't need to be perfect, right? We don't have to be perfect in how we manage this. It's just that you got to be at one tiny leg up above everyone else in your competitive supply base. So if you can do it a little bit better, you're going to be vastly ahead in terms of the grand scheme of things. But yeah, a lot of companies that we're working with now, particularly the current one now, the semiconductors, they're adjusting potentially how they do their warehousing strategies, because they're all over the place and they really can't manage things effectively. And even simple things like the spot rates they get from FedEx, UPS, and just for simple air cargo or small parcel, they're not getting aggressive pricing anymore, because even the major carriers are, uncertain as to how the economy and the market is going to go. It's too volatile right now. So how do they get ahead of that? Well, they could have managed this if they had better contracts in place and better structure in place, and they could have easily done that a year in advance. So we were able to do that. We saved them tens of millions of dollars in doing some of that, mitigating risk. But again, unless you have that information up front, you really are still at a loss until the issues happen.
You know, one thing to think about, Brian, I mean, some of these problems with the lack of supply to some extent is self-imposed because they wanted to keep their costs down and inventory down.
Yeah.
If they just kept an extra turn in their inventory, they wouldn't have had this problem. So some of it's not external only. It's that they've kind of kept everything so razor thin in terms of managing their supplies. And, you know, there's a good and a bad of it. This happens to be a negative implication from it.
I totally get that. And I mean, and again, that's, the organization needs alignment. So, you know, is the CFO, you know, hopping on, I need a couple extra pennies in the earnings report, or
Right.
is it like, okay, I need the inventory to protect myself against whatever? I mean,
Exactly.
Alicia, I like your comment about visibility. You know what? I think visibility and flexibility can kind of almost, you know, get interwoven a little bit. I mean, it blew my mind. Just everyone back up like 1 year, right? We are in explosion mode for COVID. You know, the world is kind of shut down. And I read this survey like 2 months after, like, so where are we now? End of March, end of April. So like somewhere around the end of May, right? The percentage of companies in the S&P 500 that still could not answer the question on whether or not they got any components manufactured out of Wuhan blew my mind, which just, you know, speaks to the complexity and the tiers, but also the need to have the visibility. So I'm going to hammer you guys in here, get some questions in here. We do have a couple. So Alicia, we're there for you. Can you quickly comment on, let's see. Okay, wait a minute. We got a few going on here. So let me back up here. Let me get the best ones. You know what? I'm going to talk, Alicia, quickly want to mention anything about the MBA program advice for applicants?
Yeah, so actually it's a Master's of Science program, which is supply chain analytics. So it's separate from the MBA program, but the application process is basically the same. It's a professional master's. So the application process, I would say, focus on core leadership skills. Even if you're not a leader, I'm not a manager, but focus on the skills that you have, whether it's leadership in groups, leadership within internal initiatives and things like that too. So that's what they're looking for. They're looking for people who show leadership skills and just the same thing as Brian said, well-rounded, not just having a 3.5 GPA, but being involved in organizations.
Okay, awesome. Thanks. So I'm going to start reading through some of these questions because we got a few coming in. So this is to everybody, right? As current students, what are the most important things we can do to help secure great jobs after graduation?
I can go. Something that you can do is network. So talk to someone, reach out to me. If you're interested in industry, hey, I'm interested in this. Can we talk about it? Do you know anyone who's involved in it? Ask Erin. Erin is in the group right now. Ask Erin about kind of what we've been doing. I introduced Erin to a ton of people. So now she has an extended network of 10 people. If she sees a job at a company or is interested in something, she can reach out to these people. So just network. It's super important.
Yeah, I agree. Networking is probably the number one here. You know, I understand that it's a daunting task to feel like you're a little bit left alone here to go and apply for jobs, especially at large organizations. How do you get visibility? But the biggest piece of advice here, in order to get started, is clean up your own side of the street, as I like to say. Clean up your house first. Let's make sure your LinkedIn profile is the best it can be. Make sure everything that you possibly can put you in terms of your best foot forward of your experience, your resume, all the above. You have that in tip-top shape, and it's out there on the web in the form of LinkedIn and other sites that are similar to that. So that it makes recruiters and it makes organizations much more capable of finding you and understanding who you are, and understand that it's not going to be likely not going to be very much of a conversation up front. It's going to be an algorithm that decides whether or not you're making the cut. So play the game with them, use keywords, use all those things that are going to get you hits. Once you get the hits, you'll get the interview. And then I have no doubt that you guys will be able to kill it. It's just getting to that stage. So just know that you got to play a little bit of the robot game, get ahead of the algorithm, get to the cut, and then you can make sure that you do a great job on the interview.
Yeah, so there are a couple of awesome points there. I mean, networking is one, and I'll tell you, you students that are in the supply chain program right now, while the program is relatively young, it's maybe 15 years or so-ish now, ballpark, maybe 20, which is still young in the scheme of life. The alumni that have come out of the program, I mean, I don't know one alumni that is not willing to speak to a current student. So you need to leverage, as the program grows and all these branches expand, right? You need to leverage that network. And networking isn't always the easiest thing to do, but once you get over it, I mean, that initial hump of, hey, my name's Brian and we haven't met before, but I'd love, then it just becomes kind of natural. So that's an awesome point. And also cleaning up your own house. If you think they're not going to your social media sites and checking you out, you are sadly mistaken. So
I'll vouch for that. They absolutely do. So
yep.
Get all the, don't have yourself on with a bottle of beer or a drink or doing cake stands or anything like that. People
Yep.
do look at it. Trust me.
Yep.
It happens. And then I think to Alicia's and Greg's point is never stop networking, because that's how you're going to progress in your career as well. So once you get in the habit of doing it, as you get your first job, you're going to continue to do that throughout your career. People come and go in your life, but don't burn bridges. Continue to network with people in that you've met. Even casually, keep track of them, and you're going to build up a lifetime of opportunities, because the likelihood is you're going to have multiple jobs. Greg's had several. Alicia's had a couple in her career so far, and the likelihood of you staying at one job for the rest of your life is slim and none. So you want to always build that resume. You want to always build those contacts and that network. It's so important to do that. And as much as you'd want to tell somebody what you really think of them, just do it behind the back. Just do it at home in the mirror or something like that. You just have to keep very professional. People are always going to remember the good things about you if you maintain your professionalism. So that's really, really very important. You're thinking about your career in the long run. Just don't always think of the short term. You have to think of the long term too.
You should be of the mindset that you are being interviewed every day. Every minute, right. Every day you are being interviewed, because you're going to say something and you're going to, leave an impression. I mean, even in school and even in class, okay? The students that choose not to do assignments because of whatever reason, trust me, I remember that. So when someone calls me and says, hey, you need names of, yeah, I do. And yeah, I don't. Okay. So here's another question. Can you guys speak on the pros and cons of working for a small or a big company? And again, we got maybe 6-ish minutes or so. So if you got something you want to add about that, chime in. Just kind of like, hit the high points. But pros and cons, big versus small business.
Well, I've only worked for big companies, and I can tell you some are very, very well managed and some are terribly managed. So I don't think there's necessarily an advantage between a small and a big business. You really need to pick the business that you're working for, and you have to vet them as much as they vet you. I've worked for some very big companies that I have no idea how they got so big, and I've worked for some very big companies that can be admired, and they're socially, economically, financially, they're very good. And I'm sure the same thing is for small businesses as well. So don't only think that they're vetting you. You have to vet them as well. You want to make sure their integrity is there, that you have a good opportunity to progress in your career, that there's good people there to train you and mentor you. So it's a two-way street. Do some research on them. The internet's great. If they're a big company, you've got the 10Ks, the 10Qs, you've got internet. I mean, there's, as much as you can go on social media, or they can go on social media and check you, you can check them as well. There's a lot of ratings and things like that. So do your due diligence. That's what I would say.
So in terms of, I remember I had the same question as an undergrad. Do I want to be a big fish in a small pond, or, you know, the other way around? So at the end of the day, like Steve said, it doesn't matter. I think the organization itself and how you fit in, I don't think is the big concern. What I've learned is if you are uncertain exactly kind of where you're going to fit, where you want your career to go, if you have too many question marks there, going into a larger organization allows you the opportunity and flexibility to network within that company on other things that they're doing in other open roles, so that you can figure out maybe there's something there that I can jump to, and the barriers of entry are much lower, right? You can do a lot of that hands-on kind of figuring out with a larger organization that has those opportunities there already. That gives, I mean, you may not, or you're going to still have to put the legwork in, but you don't have to then go and, you know, put the risk on yourself in having to go to another organization, take the risk of leaving a job to go to another one, to find out you don't really even want to do that. Like, those types of things aren't as big of a risk anymore. So if you really truly are like, I have absolutely zero idea type of person, the larger companies will allow you that flexibility to potentially shift without ruining your first part of your career. So that's probably my advice here. You know, the smaller companies, I mean, you're going to be filling a role, and the options of you kind of changing from that are limited. Your career path is very linear, whereas the bigger companies offer you the kind of many-pronged approach.
I'll agree with Greg. I mean, I started out of college in a very big company. I had great opportunities to learn various aspects of the insurance business, which is, you know, I've stayed in, and it was very, very helpful. I wouldn't have been able to have that opportunity in a smaller company. So there are pluses and minuses, and I think it's very specific to the company. So I wouldn't necessarily worry that it's small versus big. I think it's very situational, and you'll have to understand that. So it's a good question, and I've gotten it before, but it's not, you know, it's going to be very situational, very specific. You know, if it's really small and it's family run, you're just going to be a cog, and, you know, family's going to run the business forever. You know, I think that would be a little bit more difficult, but, you know, small business can still mean 500 employees too, you know, compared to Fortune 500 companies. So keep that in mind.
And I mean, you could have the opportunity to wear multiple hats quicker.
Right.
Right. All right. So rapid fire question. If you could have, what one thing would you have done differently that you wish you did differently when you left college to be, you know, ready for the workforce? One thing you wish you did in college that you didn't, that you know, would have better prepared you for your working career.
I can answer this one. Sorry, I had to connect on my phone, so I'm not doing video. I would say for the first one is talk to people in the industry to actually figure out what you're interested in before you start a job. There are so many different facets of supply chain. So figure out what you're interested in, what you want to target before you start, or you might get to a job and actually not really like it, which has been my experience before too. So, and also through your internships, you can build a network there and talk to people in different departments too. So maybe you're in a logistics internship, but you work with someone that's in maybe a procurement role. So you can talk to them about that too.
Right. So even if you have an internship and you decide you don't like it, that's not a throwaway. You learn something, right?
Right,
I mean,
exactly.
you learn things. You can add to your resume. You can make anything, like, I don't want to say spin it, because you need to tell the truth, right? But you can accentuate the positive. All right. But even if it was something, and you know what, transportation is just not for me. Okay, you learn that, and that's of benefit as well. So we're kind of getting up against the clock. So Greg and Steve, one thing you wish you did in college that you didn't do?
I would say I would probably be more engaged in some of the activities within the school and more than my classmates. I was more of a suitcase student, as I went home on weekends, and I probably would have gotten more out of it had I spent a little bit more time getting engaged in the activities there.
Okay.
Yeah, I gotta, you know, get on my soapbox here. Give me a second. There we go. So yeah, the engagement from the alumni base is something that we didn't have when I was a student, right? We didn't have a program then. So now that you have this full-fledged alumni base that are eager to, and they're basically begging you to take their jobs. I mean, you need to be taking advantage of this yourself. And I'll tell you that this is the type of support that is expected from like MBA type programs at top tier schools like Harvard and things like that, not for undergrad business programs, right? So we are a very unique school in the country that does this. The passion that our alumni base has to support the incoming professionals here is unlike any other. I'll tell you that. And I think you need to be very proud that you have this support network, leverage it as much as you can. And then unfortunately, you're also expected to do that in a couple of years. So I can't wait to talk to you as peers, but yeah, take advantage of the alumni network. I wish I had done that myself. It's definitely something that will help you, and hopefully some of you can see it, but hey, don't, it's not the end of the world if your internships don't align to exactly what you're trying to do. I had internships all over the board, so don't stress about it. You'll land in the right spot. Just keep moving forward.
Awesome. So we have ticked a few minutes past our scheduled start time, but that's okay. So I just want to thank Steve and thank Alicia and thank Greg for taking some time out of their busy day and sharing some insight with you guys. I want to thank all the students. I mean, we had great attendance. We had over 40 students attend, which is awesome. So again, take and understand what these three panelists have shared with you today. You know, put it in the toolbox, do the networking and stay engaged and take advantage of the rest of what Career Day has to offer. So there's another session. I believe it's starting at 10 o'clock. Is that right, Christine? Okay, so you know what? If you haven't registered yet, you can get on and register for the next session. It's all industry based. Other than that, again, in the afternoon, there's networking sessions. Take advantage of this. The College of Business puts a lot of work in that many of the other colleges at URI do not do to help prepare you for not just in the classroom, but success beyond the classroom. So thank you so much. Thanks again to the panelists.
Good
All you
luck, you all.
have an awesome
Good luck.
day.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Feel free to reach
Bye.
out.
Nice to meet you all. Same. Thanks, everybody.